Right, here we are on location now. We're at Goathland Station, which is famous more recently for the Harry Potter series, where the train was filmed. A lot of the Harry Potter series were filmed here. It's part of the North Yorkshire Moors Railway line, and as you can see, it's a lovely old station with a lot of colour. I mean, they do spend a lot of time looking after this and bringing it back to life, and it's terrific to see such a site like this. Very popular with tourists. And today we've got a sunny thing. We've got really the sun is sort of just after lunchtime, so it's really quite high in the sky, casting some lovely shadows across. So we're going to try and capture that. We're in an elevated position, just on the one of the nature trails away from the station. See that you've got that height, and we're looking down on the station. So it's going to be an interesting composition to do. I've got the train. I mean, obviously the train's coming by frequently. I think we're going to do it without the train on this particular occasion, because obviously trains have disappeared, and we're going to try to do the majority of it here on location. And so what we're going to do now, we're going to start with the sketch and then move into the watercolour. Goathland Station is made up of a lovely collection of different buildings, stone buildings, lots of colour, lots of character, lots of wonderful history in place, and it's been so well preserved. So the sketch for me is firstly trying to establish the perspective of these buildings, and a lot of this is going to be about looking at the perspective and the vanishing lines that depart over to the left, and then getting the buildings in the right shape with the waiting room or the central waiting in the middle. The sky is looking into the sun. The clouds are very diffused. I'm going to start with a warm sky using a warm yellow ochre, and then I'm going to drop in, while it's still moist and wet, the paper. I'm going to drop in some alizarin crimson and a little bit of grey, cool grey, sort of cobalt blue. After letting the sky soak in, I'm now going to bring the sky further down with some water, bring it into the landscape. Now we'll start with the distant hills, and that's going to be really trying to capture those distant yellows that the light's bouncing on, and that's going to be yellow ochre, cobalt turquoise and alizarin crimson, and bring that down the paper as it comes forward towards the buildings, intensifying the greens, bringing a little bit of depth into the greens as they come forward, which is going to be more towards using more cobalt turquoise. The next stage really is to bring in some more colour into the hedges and the distant fields in the middle of the picture, and bring that down into the painting. Again, I'm going to be using lighter greens with a touch of alizarin crimson and yellow ochre, possibly raw sienna, as we're going to look into the sun, and it's important that I get that feeling of heat and light in the distance. Now after that first wash of greens, I'm now looking at the distance and the distant hills and the distant trees, and that's going to be important that I put those now onto a semi-dry surface, and it's going to be using a blue-green in the distance, sort of cobalt blue and light red, and then transform that as it comes down with some of the other more specific bigger trees using cobalt turquoise, yellow ochre and a bit of lemon yellow, and give them some more depth to those trees as they come down. And it's important that I bring some real strong darks into the trees, particularly around the station, because they're going to have a much more intensity to them. Now it's adding shadows into the trees, blue, green, and as they come to the foreground they're going to be darker, and that's important. We can capture that feeling of depth into the trees by the station. Building up the dark shadows to the trees is a gradual process, and it's just a case of dancing the brush into the trees, around the buildings, painting negative all the time around the buildings to ensure that I don't lose any of their shape, and then ensuring I get the right intensity of colour in the right places to give that feeling of colour distance, and it's sort of really bringing in colour perspective. Now the next stage is to deal with the buildings, and the first thing we need to do is put some warm washes on the buildings to give that feeling of warm sandstone. Even though it's going to be in shade, it will still want warmth to come through, and that's going to be using a colour around yellow ochre, and drop that in. And then once we've got that in place, I then start layering in some other colour to give that sandstone colour, using ultramarine blue, raw sienna and alizarin crimson, and to build it up in greys. This will give the best effect of capturing that stone look about the buildings. After the buildings, I'm going to continue coming down the painting, bringing a bead of colour, and this colour is now going to move on to the greys, which sort of capture the platform, which is a blue grey this time, and that wants to be really ultramarine blue, light red and alizarin crimson. And then I'm going to build a much stronger grey, which is going to be ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, alizarin crimson for the shadow of the path alongside the platform. And I'm going to work my way all the way down on this painting, gradually changing the greys as I come through past the railway lines, and then into the waiting room in the foreground with the wall by the side of it. As I come towards the waiting station in the immediate foreground, there's some signature colours to put in place, and I've got some soft yellow on the side of the building, and then I've got blue on the roof, and then you've got those trees and shrubs which are a much brighter yellow and a bit of red to put in, and those are all signature ones want to go in at this stage so that it can diffuse and settle in there, and then we can put the darks in later on. Now I'm going to go back into the station area, and working from the left to the right, I'm going to first deal with the footbridge. I want to paint the darks around the footbridge, try to capture the steel-like structure. That's going to be sort of a light red really, with burnt sienna and a bit of ultramarine in there for suggestions. And then as I work along from there, from left to right, I'm going to put the buildings in the shade side of the buildings. So I'm making a darker grey of stone colour, which I'm going to drop in. I'm also going to put the windows, and I'm going to put a little bit of the paraphernalia around those, and also bring down into the intricacies of the stonework, trying to give a feel for that as I come across. All the while enjoying the trains coming into the station, picking up passengers at regular intervals. We're working our way across, and we're going to deal with the warm greens for the flower beds alongside the deeper grey for the station buildings, and trying to capture the stone effect and allow that lovely warm yellow that we put in earlier to shine through. All the time we're very conscious about the looking into the light, so it's vital that we get those greys with the right intensity in the right areas so that we capture that feeling of light hitting the buildings but providing that shadow on the face of the buildings, which is going to be so crucial to capture the mood and atmosphere of this painting. This close-up view really shows off the mix of buildings and the mix of stone and the mix of colour that we can see. It's all about putting these washes on and capturing the mood of the buildings. And as you can see, we're working our way. We're now onto the side of the buildings. We're putting a cooler side on the buildings. On the front, I'm going to be a warm grey. And it's getting that variety and just dance the brush along in decisive brush strokes. And if you can capture that feeling of mood and light, we're really onto something. The day today is really difficult because the sun is really very strong, very warm. It's making the drying of the watercolour so quick, and consequently I am getting some tide marks and various things in the greys. I'm not too worried about that because we can correct it later, but nonetheless it's something that you just have to deal with the conditions as they're thrown at you. It's a case of just continually strengthening these shadows to give them some depth. It all gives them some structure and atmosphere to the painting if you can get these shadows to the right intensity. Okay, so we're at this stage where we've got all the colours in, we've got the tones in, we've got the distance, the middle distance, the foreground. We haven't got any definition, we haven't got the final darks ready, so that needs to be done to follow up. So we're at this stage where what we're going to do, we're going to go back now into the studio and complete that final stage. Okay, so we're now back in the studio. We've got the picture that we took on the day. Obviously now we're going to deal with the darks and the tones and bring the picture back to life. So we're starting with the distance, and we're going to work from the distance to the foreground and get those shadows and tones. We're going to deal with a blue-green in the distance, which is going to transform to a deeper green into the foreground, particularly around the buildings. Colour wise, I'm thinking of around cobalt blue, alizarin crimson for the distance, and as I come forward I'm going to use cobalt turquoise and raw umber and give that depth to the shadows. And all the time I'm conscious of the tonal range, making sure that I get that light distance darks in the distance, and then I'm coming down to a much darker feeling of depth in the foreground around the buildings. Now that we've done the darks, I'm conscious that we're looking into the light, and as you look into the light you can see this shimmering sort of silvery look on some of the shrubs and the bushes, and I need to really try and capture that because that's really part of the mood and the atmosphere of looking into the light, particularly in the distance. And to do that, the best way is going to be to utilise Chinese white with a touch of cobalt blue and just drop that in, let it cascade through. That will give that shimmering effect that we want. And then also beyond that, I'm going to use some cobalt blue and light red to put the shadows that are going to cascade through from the big central trees, and that will just give a feeling of depth and shape to the background. Now we're refreshing the warm wash on the buildings using another wash of yellow ochre. From that I'm going to start shaping the darks by putting the stronger dark of cobalt blue, alizarin crimson and yellow ochre, and then put that in, and then we're going to try and capture that feeling of the stonework. This effect of the buildings can really be picked up on my palette now. If you look on my right hand side of the palette, you can see that colour story, which has got the yellow ochre at the top, and then it's got the blues and the greys at the bottom. And that colour story is going to be pretty much what I'm going to utilise to really capture that stonework on the buildings. And it's going to be about putting these greys in and then shaping them and letting them diffuse to capture that feeling of gnarled old stone buildings. The next part is about establishing the really stronger darks. Good way to do this is to squint your eyes and look at the image and try and get a feeling, and then you can pick up these darker darks much easier. And obviously in this case we're going to drop down to the platform or just below the platform and get that really strong darks that drop up towards the sort of rails, and then drop the actual rails in as well. And this is going to be ultramarine, burnt sienna and a bit of alizarin crimson. It's going to be important. It's got in a powerful way, and it is powerful dark, and it's a sort of a signature mark on the painting. Now it's all about shaping up the main station buildings, getting that contrast and tone right, ensure that we capture the mood and atmosphere while looking into the light, and getting these strong darks in the right places, and ensuring that we're using some detailed darks just to capture that feeling of shape is going to be so important. Now I'm moving towards the foreground where I'm dealing with the waiting room, which has got a stone wall by the side of it, as well as the actual waiting room itself. And it's about sort of dropping these darks in to capture some shape and also try and capture some contrast. And it's an important area because it nicely leads your eye into the picture. So it's important to get that tone just right. Now it's just a case of adding more and more detail to the buildings. Probably not specifically trying to get every individual window painting, but what I am trying to capture the essence of, and so just giving suggestions of, but with some decisive brushstrokes will be crucial. Given the essence of detail, it's about sort of giving the minimum amount of detail but allowing your eye to capture the rest, and it can be very effective. If you try overwork it and put too much detail in, it doesn't work at all, but if you just get the right amount of detail in, it can be really, really effective. I'm now working my way along the station platform and trying to capture the essence of the plants, the furniture along the station platform and all those elements within it. And a lot of it's about painting the darks around them to try and give the shape and feeling of objects in there. I'm also going to work in the gutterings and the other things that come on the station, such as the bins, and there's various other little bits and pieces that need to be dropped in just to give that impression of detail. I'm now going to drop in some red because there's quite an undertone of red in there for trimming around the buildings and such like, and that is going to be utilising light red with a little bit of alizarin crimson, and I'm going to drop the brush in and capture those elements so that I can get that feeling of colour around the grey buildings. Okay, so next thing is to put a little bit of Chinese white. I'm going to use that to capture some of those mid-tones and some of the soft highlights that are actually in the shade along the front of the station. And that's just, we're done carefully, and it can be very effective because it will just give that low lights that are in the shade and help, again, all along to enhance that mood and atmosphere. And I'm also going to put some of the gates and various highlights on the bridge and other areas that can just be usefully captured by the careful application of a bit of this Chinese white. Now I'm sort of working down towards the bottom right of the picture, and I'm dealing with the water hydrant, which is a very distinct red colour, which is going to be cabin red in this, and as well as the light red alongside the grey fence and the shadow that goes with it, all carefully dropped in. The grey fence is done with detail, and then the shadow cast from the grey fence is really done with a quick brush stroke of light grey but on dry brush effect, so you get that drag brush effect with a touch of detail in amongst it. Then finish off with a final touch of any greys that might just cascade along the platform and other areas, just to give that little bit variety in your greys and shadows. Okay, so there we have it, the finished painting of Goathland Railway Station from the Yorkshire Moors Railway. That concludes 2 paintings that we've done, one of the sketch and one of the painting. This one, I've just put a mount round it, and obviously we've brought it back into the studio and done some detail and the tone work, and hopefully we've brought out a reasonable painting, and I hope you enjoyed that. Alongside this, we've got our new watercolour starter guide, which we're really excited about. This is 5 steps to help you if you just come back into watercolour, or it's watercolour for the first time. It's a step-by-step which will help you along, get you started, get you enthused into watercolour, and it's a PDF file, so all you need to do is download it in the link below, and it's yours forever. So I hope you enjoy that. Now, without further ado, I'm just going to say, please don't forget, if you're enjoying these, like and subscribe. That gets us picked up by a wider audience. And I suppose until next time, all I've got to say is enjoy and keep painting.